I felt glass shards pierce my skin as Dad's hands pushed me backward through our dining room door. Blood trickled down my face, mixing with tears I refused to shed. "You're nothing, Letitia," he spat, stepping over broken glass. "A parasite living off our success." I touched my bleeding cheek and smiled. 28 years of being their invisible daughter ended tonight. They didn't know I owned 51% of their precious company. By tomorrow morning, their empire would be mine, and they'd learn exactly who was nothing. The chandelier crystals at the Fairmont Hotel sparkled like diamonds, casting prismatic rainbows across Madison's wedding reception. I slipped through the ballroom's side entrance 45 minutes late, my phone still warm from handling the server crash at my tech startup. Nobody knew about Technova Solutions, the company I'd built from my studio apartment, while everyone thought I was wasting away as a junior analyst at Whitmore Industries. "There she is," Patricia's voice cut through the orchestra's waltz. My mother stood near the chocolate fountain, her champagne flute paused midway to her lips. "Harold, your other daughter, finally decided to grace us with her presence." Every conversation in our vicinity quieted. I smoothed my simple navy dress, the one Patricia had sneered at during the rehearsal dinner, calling it funeral appropriate for someone mourning their potential. Madison floated over in her $30,000 gown, her new husband Brandon trailing behind like an expensive accessory. "Let me guess," Madison said, her voice honeyed with false concern. "Another emergency at that little job of yours. Really, Letitia, you couldn't put family first just once." "Some of us actually work for a living," I replied, accepting a glass of water from a passing server. Brandon laughed, the sound sharp as breaking crystal. "Work, is that what we're calling data entry these days?" He wrapped his arm around Madison's waist. "At least you have something to keep you busy since you're still single. What was it your mom said, 28 and not even a boyfriend to bring to your sister's wedding?" The crowd around us tittered. I recognized most of them: Whitmore Industries board members, their spouses, major shareholders, all here to celebrate the union of Madison Whitmore and Brandon Ashford, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, the perfect merger of wealth and prestige. Harold appeared at Patricia's side, his tuxedo impeccable, his smile cold. "Perhaps if you spent less time playing with spreadsheets and more time in the real world, you'd have something to show for yourself." He raised his champagne. "To Madison and Brandon, proof that excellence runs in the Whitmore blood. Most of it anyway." Patricia added, her gaze sliding over me like I was furniture. The toast rang out, glasses clinking. I stood there invisible again, the familiar ache of exclusion settling in my chest. 28 years of this. 28 years of being the disappointment, the afterthought, the one who could never measure up to Madison's golden perfection. A flash went off nearby. The wedding photographer, a young man with kind eyes, lowered his camera and moved closer to me. "Beautiful shot of the family," he said loudly, then dropped his voice to a whisper. "Though I got more interesting ones in the parking lot earlier, your father and some gentleman exchanging an envelope full of cash." My pulse quickened. "What gentleman?" "Senator Morrison's aide. I recognized him from the campaign rallies I've covered." The photographer, his badge read Kyle Martinez, pretended to adjust his lens. "None of my business, of course. But in my experience, parking lot cash exchanges at society weddings are rarely about wedding gifts." He pressed a business card into my hand and melted back into the crowd. I tucked it into my clutch, my mind racing. Senator Morrison was pushing legislation that would benefit Whitmore Industries enormously. Tax breaks worth millions. If Harold was paying bribes... Letitia. Madison's shriek cut through my thoughts. "You're in the background of our father-daughter dance photos. Could you please move? Some of us are trying to create memories worth preserving." I stepped aside, watching Harold spin Madison across the dance floor. The golden child and the golden father building their golden empire on foundations I was beginning to suspect were made of sand. The rest of the reception blurred past. I endured Patricia's suggestions about taking a cooking class. Men appreciate domestic skills. Harold's lecture about my lack of ambition, and countless pitying looks from family friends. Madison tossed her bouquet directly to her sorority sisters, making sure it went nowhere near my direction. By the time the newlyweds departed in a shower of rose petals, I'd made my decision. Tomorrow, I'd start digging into those financial records I'd been noticing irregularities in. Tonight had shown me, once and for all, that I'd never earned their respect by being the daughter they wanted. Maybe it was time to become the daughter they never saw coming. Monday morning arrived with Seattle's typical drizzle, the kind that made the glass towers of the financial district look like they were weeping. I arrived at Whitmore Industries at 6:30 an hour before my usual time, the building nearly empty except for security and the cleaning crew. My cubicle sat on the third floor, far from the executive suites where Harold held court. The nameplate read, L. Whitmore, Junior Analyst, a title that meant nothing and guaranteed I'd stay nothing in the company hierarchy. Harold had created the position 5 years ago, announcing at a board meeting that he believed in providing opportunities for all family members regardless of capability. I powered up my computer and pulled out the files I'd been reviewing. For months, I'd noticed discrepancies in the quarterly reports. Small things. Vendor payments that didn't match invoices, consulting fees, to companies that seemed to exist only on paper. Each irregularity was minor, but together they painted a picture I was beginning to understand. You're here early. Marcus Vaughn, the CFO, stood at my cubicle entrance. His usually perfect silver hair seemed disheveled, his tie crooked. Just catching up on some analysis, I said, minimizing my screen. He leaned against the partition, studying me with bloodshot eyes. You know, Letitia, your father worries about you, always buried in these numbers. A young woman should have interests outside of work. I find numbers interesting. Do you? His smile didn't reach his eyes. Sometimes numbers can be misleading. Sometimes it's better to trust that senior management has everything under control. Before I could respond, Harold's voice boomed from the elevator bay. Marcus, my office now. We need to discuss the Morrison situation. Marcus straightened his tie and hurried away. I waited until their footsteps faded, then reopened my files. The Morrison situation. Senator Morrison, whose aide had taken an envelope of cash from Harold at Madison's wedding. I spent the next 2 hours documenting every suspicious transaction I could find. The pattern became clearer with each entry. Money flowing out through shell companies circling back as inflated contracts. Classic embezzlement, but sophisticated enough to pass casual scrutiny. Around 9, the office filled with my co-workers. I kept my head down, playing the role of the incompetent nepotism hire everyone expected. During my lunch break, I ventured to the basement archives. Hardly anyone came down here anymore. Everything was supposedly digitized. But I'd learned that Harold was old-fashioned about certain documents. Original contracts, founding paperwork, anything he deemed historically significant, stayed in physical form. I told the archive clerk I was researching for the company's upcoming 60th anniversary celebration a lie that got me access to the oldest files. In a dusty box marked 1965-1970, I found them. The original incorporation documents for Whitmore Industries. My breath caught as I read the founder's name, Eleanor Whitmore, my grandmother who died when I was 10. But that wasn't the shocking part. According to these papers, Eleanor had founded the company with her own inheritance, her own vision. Harold hadn't built this empire, he'd inherited it. More interesting still were the handwritten notes in the margins, Eleanor's distinctive script outlining her succession plans. The company should pass to the child who demonstrates true business acumen regardless of birth order or gender. Merit, not blood, must determine leadership. A sticky note was attached to this section dated just a year before Eleanor's death. Re Letitia, shows exceptional promise. Harold refuses to see it. Must protect her interests. My hands shook as I photographed every page. All these years, Harold had told the story of building Whitmore Industries, from nothing of being the visionary entrepreneur. But Eleanor had been the true architect, and she'd seen something in me that my parents refused to acknowledge. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly returned the files, tucking my phone away. The archive clerk appeared looking nervous. "Miss Whitmore, your father is looking for you. He seems upset." I climbed back to the third floor to find Harold in my cubicle, his face purple with rage. My computer screen showed the financial analysis I'd been working on. "What is this?" He held up printed copies of my spreadsheets. "Financial analysis? It's my job." "Your job is to sit quietly and be grateful for the opportunity." He crumpled the papers. "Marcus tells me you've been asking questions about vendor payments. I noticed some discrepancies." "You noticed nothing." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You're going to delete these files, forget these numbers, and remember that you have a position here only because I allow it. Eleanor might have had a soft spot for you, but Eleanor is dead. I decide who belongs in this company." He stormed out, leaving the crumpled papers on my desk. I smoothed them out carefully, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. Merit not blood. Eleanor had seen something in me, had tried to protect my interests. It was time to find out exactly what she'd done. The law offices of Wallace Brennan and Associates occupied the top floor of a historic building, downtown, all dark wood and leather-bound books. I'd made the appointment for after work, telling the receptionist only that I had questions about Eleanor Whitmore's estate. Sherman Wallace himself met me in the lobby. He was older than I'd expected, probably in his 70s, with sharp hazel eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His handshake was firm, his smile surprisingly warm. "Letitia," he said, leading me to his private office. "I've been waiting for this visit for 18 years. I settled into a leather chair across from his massive oak desk. "You knew my grandmother." Eleanor was more than a client. She was a visionary, a true businesswoman in an era when such things were rare. He moved to an antique safe in the corner. She came to me 2 years before her death with very specific instructions. "About what?" "About you." Sherman withdrew a sealed envelope from the safe. My name was written across it in Eleanor's handwriting. "She said I was to give this to you only if you came asking the right questions. Questions about the company's founding, about succession, about your place in the family legacy." My fingers trembled as I took the envelope. "Why all the secrecy?" "Read the letter. Then we'll discuss what Eleanor put in place to protect you." I broke the seal and unfolded pages covered in my grandmother's elegant script. "My dearest Letitia, if you are reading this, then you have begun to see through the facade your father has built. By now, you've likely discovered that Whitmore Industries was my creation, not his. But there is so much more you need to know. Harold is my son, but he is not the heir I would have chosen. From the time you were 5 years old, barely able to see over my desk, you showed more business instinct than he ever possessed. You would organize your toys by color and size, create elaborate systems for trading Halloween candy, calculate the exact number of lemonade cups needed to break even at your stand. Harold saw these traits as oddities. I saw them as genius. I have watched him diminish you, hide your light, try to mold you into something small and manageable. I have also watched you persist, creating your own opportunities despite his obstacles. The tech startup you're building in secret." Yes. I knew about it even then. A grandmother has her ways. What Harold doesn't know is that I took steps to ensure the company would eventually pass to its rightful leader. With Sherman's help, I created an irrevocable trust. In it, I placed 51% of Whitmore Industries shares. These shares are yours, Letitia, but they come with conditions. The trust activates only when you can prove Harold has violated his fiduciary duty to the company. This was deliberate. I needed to ensure you were ready, that you understood the responsibility, and that you had just cause for taking control. A company built on merit must change hands the same way. Sherman has been documenting Harold's activities for years. When you're ready, he will share what he's collected. But the final piece must come from you. Evidence gathered by your own hands, proof that you see what needs seeing. I wish I could have lived to watch you claim your birthright, but know that I loved you, believed in you, and set these wheels in motion to ensure that one day Whitmore Industries would be led by its most capable heir. Remember, it was never about blood. It was always about who you choose to become. All my love, Eleanor. I read the letter 3 times before looking up at Sherman. Tears blurred my vision, but my voice was steady. She knew. She knew everything. Eleanor was brilliant at reading people, Sherman said, handing me a tissue. She saw Harold's nature early, his greed, his need for control, his willingness to cut corners. She also saw your potential. You said you've been documenting his activities. Sherman produced a flash drive from his desk drawer. 20 years of evidence. Embezzlement, bribery, tax fraud, manipulation of board votes. Everything needed to prove breach of fiduciary duty. He paused. There's more. Things that go beyond financial crimes. What kind of things? The executor of Eleanor's will died in a car accident 6 months after her death. Single vehicle ran off a cliff. No skid marks. The executor had been asking questions about certain provisions in Eleanor's will. Provisions Harold claimed didn't exist. My blood ran cold. You think my father... I think your father is capable of anything to protect what he believes is his. Sherman leaned forward. But with this evidence and your shares, you can take it all away from him. The question is, are you ready for that fight? I thought about 28 years of being called worthless, of watching Harold and Patricia lavish everything on Madison while treating me like an unwanted guest in my own family. I thought about my grandmother planning all of this before I could even understand what she was giving me. I've been ready my whole life, I said. I just didn't know it until now. Sherman smiled, the expression transforming his austere features. Then let's discuss strategy. Harold won't go down without a fight, and he has powerful allies. But you have something he doesn't. What's that? The truth. And in my experience, the truth properly deployed is the most powerful weapon of all. We spent the next 3 hours reviewing the evidence planning approaches, discussing timing. By the time I left Sherman's office, the flash drive secure in my bag, I felt like a different person. Not the disappointing daughter, not the family failure, but Eleanor Whitmore's chosen heir. Harold thought he'd buried Eleanor's legacy with her. He was about to learn that some things refuse to stay buried, and some granddaughters refuse to stay silent. Friday evening arrived with an unusual Seattle clearness, the kind of crisp November air that made the city sparkle. I pulled into my parents' circular driveway, noting the familiar cars already present. Madison's white Mercedes, Brandon's Porsche, and Harold's vintage Bentley all gleamed under the security lights. The family dinner had been Patricia's idea, a celebration of Madison's wonderful news. I'd received the invitation via text, typical of how my mother communicated with me. Minimal effort, maximum distance. But tonight that distance would work in my favor. I'd spent the week carefully reviewing Sherman's evidence, memorizing key dates and figures. The flash drive stayed locked in a safety deposit box, but its contents lived in my mind now. Every fraudulent transaction, every bribe, every violation of law Harold had committed while building his stolen empire. Patricia answered the door wearing pearls in judgment. "Letitia, you're actually on time. Will wonders never cease?" She air-kissed my cheek, the gesture as empty as her smile. "Do try to be pleasant tonight. Madison has special news." The dining room glowed with candlelight, the table set with Eleanor's china. An irony that wasn't lost on me. Madison sat at Harold's right hand, Brandon beside her, both of them radiating smugness like heat from a fire. "Sister dear," Madison purred as I took my usual seat at the far end of the table. "Don't you look comfortable? Is that the same dress you wore to my engagement party?" "I believe in sustainability," I replied, unfolding my napkin. Harold snorted. "Sustainability? Is that what we're calling being too poor to buy proper clothes?" "Now, Harold." Patricia said, though her tone held amusement rather than reproach. Let's save the life lessons for after Madison's announcement. Madison practically glowed as she stood Brandon rising with her. Well, we weren't going to share this until Christmas, but we just can't wait. She placed a manicured hand on her still flat stomach. We're having a baby. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Patricia shrieked with delight. Harold beamed with pride, and expensive champagne appeared as if by magic. I offered my congratulations, genuinely happy for the life growing inside my sister, even if I felt sorry for the family it would be born into. To the next generation of Whitmore excellence, Harold toasted his eyes, finding mine across the table. May they inherit the strength and success of their predecessors. Speaking of inheritance, I said quietly as glasses clinked, I've been doing some interesting research into Whitmore Industries' history. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Research. Harold's voice carried a warning. I thought I made myself clear about your little number games. Oh, this wasn't about numbers. It was about history. Grandmother's history specifically. I sipped my water, maintaining eye contact. Did you know she kept incredibly detailed records about the company's founding? Madison rolled her eyes. God, Letitia, could you be more boring? We're trying to celebrate life here, not dig up ancient history. I find it fascinating, I continued, especially the parts about how she built the company from nothing, how she turned her inheritance into an empire. Strange how those stories never made it into the official company biography. Harold's knuckles whitened around his champagne flute. Your grandmother was a complicated woman. Not all stories need telling. Some do, though, like the story of how she wanted the company to pass to the person who showed the most business acumen. Merit over birthright, she called it. Enough. Harold's fist slammed onto the table, making the china rattle. I won't have you disrespecting this family's legacy with your fantasies. Whose legacy? I asked. Yours or Eleanor's? Patricia gasped. Madison's mouth fell open. Brandon looked between us like he was watching a tennis match, but I kept my eyes on Harold, watching the rage build in his face like pressure in a boiler. You ungrateful little parasite, he hissed. I gave you everything. A job you didn't deserve, a place in this family you've never earned chance after chance to make something of yourself. You gave me nothing that wasn't already mine, I said calmly, and you took everything that was. Letitia, stop this immediately, Patricia commanded. Apologize to your father. For what? Telling the truth. I stood my chair, scraping against the hardwood. For discovering that this entire empire was built on grandmother's vision, not his. For noticing the interesting financial irregularities that started right after her death. Harold lunged to his feet, his face now purple with fury. You know nothing. You are nothing. A disappointing afterthought we've tolerated for too long. Harold. Patricia's voice held the first note of genuine alarm I'd ever heard from her. But Harold was beyond hearing. Years of carefully controlled rage finally found its target. You want to dig into history? Let's talk about history. About a grandmother who filled your head with delusions of competence, about a foolish old woman who thought DNA could be overcome with wishful thinking. That foolish old woman built everything you claim is yours, I shot back. And I've spent 30 years cleaning up her mistakes, turning her quaint little company into a real empire, making the hard decisions she was too weak to make. Like bribing Senator Morrison. The words hung in the air like a lit fuse. Madison gasped. Brandon choked on his champagne. Patricia's face went white. What did you just say? Harold's voice dropped to a whisper more terrifying than his shouts. You heard me. Cash payments to ensure favorable legislation. Tax fraud to hide the profits. Embezzlement disguised as consulting fees. I lifted my chin. Did you really think no one would notice? You little bitch! Harold snarled, rounding the table toward me. You have no idea what you're playing with. I know exactly what I'm playing with. The question is, do you... He grabbed my shoulders, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. You'll destroy everything. Everything I've built. Everything Eleanor built, I corrected, and maybe it needs destroying. The rage in his eyes went supernova. With a roar of pure fury, he spun me around and shoved with all his strength. I saw the glass doors of the dining room hutch rushing toward me, heard Patricia's scream, felt the explosion of pain as I crashed through them. Glass shattered around me like frozen rain. Sharp edges bit into my skin, arms, face, shoulders. I hit the floor in a cascade of crystal shards, blood already beginning to flow from dozens of cuts. The pain was extraordinary, but not as extraordinary as the clarity that came with it. I pushed myself up on bleeding palms, glass crunching beneath me. Blood ran down my face, warm and sticky, dripping onto Eleanor's Persian rug. Through the red haze, I saw my family frozen in tableau, Madison with her hands over her mouth, Brandon half-standing, Patricia clutching her pearls, and Harold breathing like he'd run a marathon. I smiled, blood on my teeth glass in my hair, and I smiled. "You just lost everything," I said softly. Harold stepped toward me, glass crunching under his Italian loafers. "You're nothing, Letitia, a parasite living off our success, and after tonight you won't even be that." I touched my bleeding cheek, felt the wetness there, and my smile widened. 51%. "What?" "I own 51% of Whitmore Industries. Grandmother saw to that, and you just gave me everything I need to claim it." The color drained from Harold's face. "You're lying." "Sherman Wallace. Tomorrow morning. Bring your lawyers." I stood carefully, glass falling from my clothes like deadly snow. Or don't. Either way, by Monday, everyone will know who really owns your empire. I walked out of that dining room with blood dripping down my face and glass embedded in my skin. But for the first time in 28 years, I walked tall. Behind me, I heard Madison's whisper, "Daddy, what did she mean?" Harold didn't answer. He didn't need to. By tomorrow, the whole world would know. The war for Whitmore Industries had begun, and I'd already won the first battle. The emergency room at Harborview Medical Center smelled of antiseptic and fear. I sat on a gurney in Bay 12 watching blood drip onto the white paper covering as a nurse named Jenny Chen cleaned glass from my wounds. Her hands were gentle but efficient, each piece of crystal she extracted making a small plink as it hit the metal tray. 23 stitches so far," she murmured, working on a particularly deep gash on my forearm. "You're lucky none of these hit an artery." "Lucky," I repeated the word, tasting strange in my mouth. Jenny paused, really looking at me for the first time. Recognition dawned in her dark eyes. "Wait, you're Letitia Whitmore. I've seen your picture in the business section. You work at Whitmore Industries." "For now." She resumed her work, but I caught the way her jaw tightened. "These injuries, the pattern suggests you were pushed, hard." "Very observant." "I've been an ER nurse for 15 years. I know what domestic violence looks like." She lowered her voice. "I also know the Whitmore family reputation. Your father's connections run deep in this city." As if summoned by his name, Officer Daniel Reeves appeared at the curtain's edge. I recognized the type immediately. Early 50s, soft around the middle, wearing the satisfied expression of a man who'd found his price and been paid it regularly. "Miss Whitmore, I'm here about the incident at your parents' home." He pulled out a notebook he clearly had no intention of using. "Your father called, said there was an unfortunate accident during dinner." "Is that what he called it?" "Accidents happen, especially when family members have been drinking." His eyes were cold, calculating. "I'm sure you'd agree it's best for everyone if we handle this quietly." Jenny's hand stilled on my shoulder. I could feel her tension, her anger on my behalf. "I wasn't drinking," I said clearly, "and being thrown through a glass door isn't an accident." Reeves sighed like I was a particularly difficult child. "Miss Whitmore, I've already spoken to your parents and your sister. They all confirm you'd been acting erratically, making wild accusations. Your father tried to calm you down. You stumbled and fell into the cabinet." "That's not what happened." 3 witnesses say otherwise." He closed his unused notebook. "Now we can do this the hard way, where you make a fuss and nothing comes of it except embarrassment for your family. Or we can all agree this was an unfortunate accident and move on." "Get out." Jenny's voice cut through the cubicle like a scalpel. "This is a medical area. You're disturbing my patient." Reeves turned his cold gaze on her. "I'd be careful, nurse. The Whitmores donate extensively to this hospital. And I'm sure the medical board would love to hear about police officers intimidating assault victims during treatment." Jenny smiled sweetly. "I'm recording this interaction for my patient's medical record, by the way. Hospital policy for domestic violence cases." I saw her phone propped against the supply cart, red recording light steady. Reeves saw it too. His face flushed. "This isn't over," he told me, then pushed through the curtain and disappeared. Jenny continued working in silence for several minutes before speaking. That recording, not actually hospital policy, but he didn't know that. "Why?" I asked. "Because I've seen too many women in this ER convinced to stay quiet. Too many accidents that weren't accidents." She tied off the last stitch. "And because my daughter works for the SEC." My head snapped up, sending a fresh wave of pain through the cuts on my scalp. "The Securities and Exchange Commission?" "Sarah Chen. Been there 3 years working in the enforcement division." Jenny applied antibiotic ointment with careful strokes. "She comes home frustrated every night about cases that get buried because of political connections, cases involving prominent Seattle business figures. Like Harold Whitmore." Jenny met my eyes in the mirror above the sink. "She can't discuss active investigations, but she did mention that sometimes they need someone on the inside to come forward, someone with access to documentation, someone brave enough to stand up to power." She finished bandaging the worst of the cuts, then pulled out her personal phone. "I'm going to give you Sarah's direct number. What you do with it is your choice." As she wrote the number on a prescription pad, the curtain rustled again. Madison stood there in her designer dress, not a hair out of place despite the evening's violence. "Letitia," she said, her voice dripping false concern. "How are you feeling?" Like I was thrown through a glass door. Madison's laugh was brittle. Always so dramatic. That's not how Daddy tells it. Daddy's going to be telling it to a federal grand jury soon enough. Her composure cracked slightly. "You need to stop this. Whatever game you're playing, whatever attention you're seeking, it ends now. Or what Harold will throw me through another door. He's willing to make a deal." Madison moved closer, lowering her voice. "Drop this nonsense about ownership, forget what you think you know, and he'll set you up with a generous trust fund. Enough to live comfortably, away from Seattle." "He wants to buy my silence. He wants to protect the family. Our name, our reputation, our future." Her hand went to her stomach. "My baby's future." "What about my future?" Madison's mask slipped entirely, revealing the contempt beneath. "You never had one. Not really. You were always the spare Letitia, the backup plan that was never needed." She leaned in close enough that I could smell her perfume. "Take the money. Disappear. Or I promise you what happened tonight will seem like a love tap compared to what's coming." Jenny cleared her throat loudly. "I need to finish treating my patient. You'll have to leave." Madison straightened, composing herself. "Think about it, sister. Think about what you're risking, and for what A company you'll never be smart enough to run a family that will never want you." She swept out, leaving silence in her wake. Jenny finished her work without comment, but I caught her expression in the mirror, disgust mixed with determination. "All done," she finally said, helping me off the gurney. "You'll need to follow up with your primary care physician in a week for suture removal." I stood carefully testing my balance. Everything hurt, but nothing was broken. "Thank you for everything." Jenny handed me the prescription pad with Sarah's number. "My daughter usually works late. If you called tonight, you'd probably catch her at her desk. Would she be interested in financial records showing embezzlement, tax fraud, and bribery involving a major corporation?" "She'd be very interested, especially if that corporation's CEO had connections preventing normal channels of investigation. I tucked the number into my pocket. Decision made. Then I should probably make that call. Jenny smiled, the expression transforming her tired face. Miss Whitmore, your grandmother would be proud. I thought about Eleanor's letter, about her faith in me, about the trust she'd set up to protect her company from Harold's greed. I hope so, I said. I really hope so. I left the hospital with 37 stitches, a mild concussion, and Sarah Chen's direct line. Harold thought he'd broken me tonight. Instead, he'd forged me into something harder, sharper, more dangerous than he could imagine. The recording Jenny made would be evidence. The call to Sarah would be the beginning of justice, and the trust documents Sherman held would be the end of Harold's empire. By morning, the man who threw me through glass would learn that some things were impossible to break, especially granddaughters who'd inherited more than just shares in a company. Rachel Chen was nothing like her sister Jenny. Where the nurse was soft-spoken and careful, the investigative journalist was sharp as winter wind. We met at Pike Place Market at dawn, the early morning vendors providing cover for our conversation. She bought coffee while I pretended to browse flowers, both of us watching for anyone who might be watching us. Sarah called me after you spoke, Rachel said, sliding a cup into my bandaged hands. Said you had a story that needed telling. Your family is very helpful. We believe in justice. Also, we really hate bullies. She studied the visible cuts on my face. Those look fresh. 3 days old, my father's handiwork. Rachel pulled out her phone not to record, but to show me something. I've been tracking Whitmore Industries for 2 years. Every government contract, every political donation, every board member's connection. Your father is careful, but he's also arrogant. Arrogant men make mistakes. The screen showed a complex web of connections. Whitmore Industries at the center line spreading to politicians, judges, business leaders. It looked like a spider's web, and Harold sat at its heart like something venomous. I could never prove anything solid, Rachel continued. Every time I got close, sources would disappear or recant. Documents would vanish. Once my laptop was stolen from my locked car along with all my backup drives. What changed? You, a source inside the family with access to documents Harold can't make disappear. She leaned forward. Sarah says you have financial records. I need more than numbers, though. I need a human story. I need people to understand what kind of man Harold Whitmore really is. I thought about 28 years of emotional abuse, about Eleanor's stolen legacy, about blood running down my face while my family watched. I can give you that story. We spent 3 hours in a back corner of the market, Rachel taking notes while I laid out everything. The financial crimes were just the beginning. I told her about Eleanor's death, about the executor who died in a suspicious accident, about years of Harold diminishing and destroying anyone who threatened his control. He's built an empire on lies, I concluded. Told everyone he created Whitmore Industries from nothing when really he stole it from his mother's corpse. Rachel's typing never slowed. The trust documents. You're certain they're legitimate? Sherman Wallace staked his reputation on it. 51% ownership waiting for someone to prove Harold violated his fiduciary duty, which the financial records prove. Along with the bribery, the tax fraud, and everything else on that flash drive. Rachel saved her notes, then looked at me directly. Once this story breaks, there's no going back. Your father will use every resource call in every favor. Are you prepared for that? He threw me through a glass door. I'm already past the point of no return. Then let's burn it down. Rachel smiled, the expression predatory. I'll need 12 hours to verify everything with Sarah's SEC documents, cross-reference with my sources. The story will go live tonight on our digital platform, then print edition tomorrow morning. That fast. Harold's not the only one with connections. My editor has been waiting for this story for years. He'll clear the front page. She paused. There's something else. Senator Morrison's office. They've been conducting their own investigation into suspicious campaign contributions. Your father's name keeps coming up. My phone buzzed. Madison. I'd been ignoring her calls for 3 days, but this time she'd sent a text. "Brandon knows everything. He wants to meet, please." Rachel noticed my expression. "Problem? Maybe, or maybe an opportunity." I showed her the text. "My brother-in-law has been helping Harold hide money offshore. If he's scared enough to break ranks, get him on record. If we can show the money trail from both ends, Harold won't be able to claim ignorance." Rachel handed me a small device. Voice recorder. Better than phone apps admissible in court. I pocketed the recorder and stood to leave. "Rachel, why risk so much for this story?" "Because journalism is supposed to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Your father has been comfortable for too long." She raised her coffee cup in mock salute. "Go afflict him some more." I met Brandon at his downtown office. Ashford Pharmaceutical occupied 3 floors of pristine glass and chrome, all of it as cold as Brandon himself. But when his secretary showed me in, I barely recognized my brother-in-law. Gone was the smooth arrogance. He looked haggard, tie-askew stubble darkening his usually pristine jaw. "Jesus, Letitia." He stared at my still healing cuts. "Madison said Harold pushed you, but I didn't. I didn't realize." "What do you want, Brandon?" He poured himself scotch with shaking hands, didn't offer me any. "I'm 32 years old. I have a pregnant wife, a reputation, a future, and your father is going to destroy all of it." "Harold destroys everyone eventually." "Not like this." Brandon pulled out a tablet showing me bank statements. 15 offshore accounts in my name. I thought I was being smart, helping him shelter assets. He said it was standard practice that everyone did it. "Everyone doesn't, just criminals." "I'm not a criminal." The words came out as a plea. I'm an idiot who wanted to impress his father-in-law, who wanted to be part of the Whitmore empire. I didn't know about the bribes, the tax fraud, the rest of it. Not until Madison's wedding when I saw him with Morrison's aide. I activated Rachel's recorder in my pocket. "Tell me about the offshore accounts." For the next hour, Brandon spilled everything. Account numbers, transfer dates, the shell companies Harold used to move money. He had screenshots, emails, even recorded conversations where Harold explained the scheme. "He made it sound so reasonable," Brandon said, pouring another scotch. "Like we were just being smart businessmen. But after what happened at dinner, after he hurt you like that, I started thinking, if he could do that to his own daughter..." "He's done worse," I said quietly. "Did you know Eleanor's will executor died right after she did single-car accident? No witnesses?" Brandon went pale. "You think Harold..." "I think Harold protects what he considers his at any cost." I leaned forward. "But you can protect yourself. Testify. Give the authorities everything. Trade your information for immunity." "Madison will never forgive me." "Madison chose Harold's money over her sister's blood. Do you really want to raise a child in that kind of family?" Brandon stared at his drink for a long moment. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a flash drive. "Everything's on here. Every transaction, every account, every crime I helped him commit." He pushed it across the desk. "There's more. Harold's been planning something, moving larger amounts than usual, liquidating assets. I think he knows you're coming for him." "Let him prepare. He can't fight the truth." "You really believe that..." Brandon's laugh was bitter. "You really think truth matters to men like Harold?" "I think the FBI will find truth very interesting, especially when combined with SEC violations and Senate ethics investigations." Brandon handed me a business card. "My lawyer, former federal prosecutor. Tell him I sent you, that I'm ready to cooperate fully." He stood straightening his tie with mechanical precision. "Letitia, I'm sorry for all of it. The jokes, the insults, standing by while they treated you like nothing. You can apologize by doing the right thing now." "Yeah," he smiled sadly. "Maybe that'll be enough to look my kid in the eye someday." I left Ashford Pharmaceutical with 2 flash drives and a cooperating witness. By the time I reached my car, Rachel had texted, "Story uploads in 3 hours. Suggest you find somewhere safe to watch the show." 3 hours until Harold's empire began its public collapse. 3 hours until Seattle learned who really built Whitmore Industries. 3 hours until the truth Eleanor protected finally saw light. I drove home carefully, very aware of the recordings and evidence I carried. Harold thought he'd silenced me with violence. Instead, he'd created exactly the catalyst needed to destroy everything he'd stolen. The media storm was coming, and Harold Whitmore was about to learn what happened when you threw the wrong daughter through a glass door. The story broke at 9 p.m. Pacific time. The Whitmore Deception, an empire built on lies, screamed across the Seattle Tribune's digital platform. Rachel Chen had crafted a masterpiece of investigative journalism, weaving together financial crimes with the human cost of Harold's greed. By midnight, it was trending nationally. I watched the explosion from my apartment phone, turned off, blinds drawn, but I couldn't hide from what was coming. At 6 a.m., Sherman Wallace called from a number I didn't recognize. "Emergency board meeting," he said without preamble. "Harold's called it for 8 this morning. He plans to fire you and ban you from company property before you can present the trust documents." "Can he do that?" "He can try, but I'll be there with everything we need." Sherman paused. "Letitia, 3 board members reached out to me overnight. They want to meet with you before the meeting, privately." Which is how I found myself in the Fairmont Hotel's presidential suite at 7:15, facing 3 of Whitmore Industries' longest-serving board members: Dorothy Pearson, 73, who'd known Eleanor personally; James Mitchell, 68, former federal judge; and Raj Patel, 55, tech mogul who'd joined the board 5 years ago. "We've been waiting for this day," Dorothy said without preamble. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes like flint. "Harold thinks we're doddering fools, rubber stamps for his agenda. He's wrong." James nodded. "We've been documenting his actions for years. Questionable contracts, suspicious board resolutions, meetings that violated corporate bylaws. We couldn't act without a majority shareholder to back us." "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I asked. "To whom?" Raj spread his hands. "Harold controlled the board chair position, the executive committee, the audit committee. Every time one of us raised concerns, we'd find ourselves mysteriously unable to attend the next meeting. Food poisoning, car troubles, family emergencies. Threats. Nothing provable," Dorothy said. "Harold is too smart for direct threats. But the message was clear: play along or face consequences." Sherman opened his briefcase, spreading documents across the coffee table. "The trust Eleanor created is ironclad. 51% of shares transferred to Letitia upon proof of Harold's breach of fiduciary duty. The newspaper story, the SEC investigation, Brandon's cooperation. It's more than enough." "There's more," James said quietly. "The 3 of us represent another 12% of shares. Combined with your 51, that's enough to remove Harold immediately." My heart raced. "You'd vote with me." "We'd vote with Eleanor's chosen heir," Dorothy corrected. "I was there when she revised her will. She saw what Harold was becoming, knew what he'd do with unchecked power. You were her safeguard, Letitia, her hope for the company's future." "What about the other board members?" Raj smiled grimly. "Peterson and Banks are Harold's creatures. They'll vote with him. But Samuelson is wavering. He's terrified of federal prosecution. Chen and Williams will follow the majority. Morrison is anybody's guess." "That gives us the votes," Sherman said. "But Harold won't go quietly." Dorothy stood smoothing her skirt. "Then we'd better get to the boardroom. It's time for Eleanor's granddaughter to claim her inheritance." We walked into Whitmore Industries as a group security too shocked to stop us. The executive boardroom on the 40th floor hummed with tension. Harold sat at the head of the table, Patricia beside him, both dressed in severe black like they were attending a funeral. Madison huddled in a corner, eyes red from crying. "You have some nerve showing up here," Harold snarled as we entered. "After the lies you've spread, the damage you've caused." "Good morning to you too, Father." I took a seat directly across from him, Sherman on my right, Dorothy on my left. The other board members filed in expressions ranging from curious to terrified. Peterson and Banks flanked Harold as expected. The others arranged themselves carefully in neutral positions. Harold slammed his gavel. This emergency meeting of the Whitmore Industries Board is called to order. First item, the immediate termination of Letitia Whitmore for cause. Point of order, Sherman said calmly. You can't fire a majority shareholder. She's an employee, not a shareholder. Not anymore. Sherman placed the trust documents on the table. As of this morning, Letitia Whitmore controls 51% of Whitmore Industries shares inherited from Eleanor Whitmore and activated by Harold Whitmore's proven breach of fiduciary duty. The room erupted. Peterson shouted about forgeries. Banks demanded authentication. Morrison asked to see the documents. Through it all, Harold sat frozen, his face cycling through shades of purple. This is impossible, he finally managed. Mother would never— Eleanor would and did, Dorothy interjected. I witnessed the trust creation myself. She knew what you were, Harold, what you'd become without oversight. You bitter old crow, Patricia hissed. You've always been jealous of our success. Success. James Mitchell leaned forward. Is that what we're calling embezzlement these days? Or perhaps you mean the bribes to Senator Morrison? The offshore accounts Brandon Ashford is currently detailing to federal prosecutors. Madison gasped. Brandon wouldn't— Brandon's protecting himself and his child from your father's crimes, I said. Something you might consider. Harold stood slowly, hands flat on the table. You think you've won. You think a piece of paper changes anything. I built this company. Yep. Eleanor built this company, I corrected. You stole it, and now I'm taking it back. Motion on the floor, Dorothy announced. Remove Harold Whitmore as CEO and board chair effective immediately. Seconded, said James. All in favor, Sherman asked. One by one, hands rose. Dorothy, James, Raj. Then surprisingly, Morrison. Samuelson followed, sweat beading on his forehead. Chen and Williams exchanged glances, then raised their hands as well. Motion carries, Sherman announced, 7 votes to 3. No, Harold roared. This is my company, my legacy. Your legacy is a federal indictment, I said quietly. Your empire was built on Eleanor's foundation and maintained through crime. It ends today. Harold lunged across the table, hands reaching for my throat. But James and Raj were ready, grabbing him before he could reach me. Security burst in. Dorothy had apparently texted them during the vote. Escort Mr. Whitmore from the building, Dorothy commanded. His access is revoked effective immediately. You can't do this. Harold struggled against the security guards. I'll destroy you all, every last one of you. Mr. Whitmore. I stood meeting his wild eyes. You already tried to destroy me. Threw me through a glass door. Remember, all it did was show everyone what you really are. As security dragged him out, Harold's final words echoed through the boardroom. You're nothing, Letitia. Nothing. Patricia followed, her perfect composure finally cracked. Madison lingered, tears streaming down her face. How could you— she whispered. He's our father. He's a criminal who hurt people for profit, including us. I softened my voice. It's not too late, Madison. You can choose a different path. She fled without responding. The remaining board members sat in stunned silence. Well, Dorothy said finally, I believe we need to elect a new CEO. I nominate Letitia Whitmore, Raj said immediately. Seconded, from James. The vote was unanimous among those remaining. In less than an hour, I'd gone from family pariah to CEO of a billion-dollar company. Eleanor's portrait watched from the wall, and I could almost swear she was smiling. Ladies and gentlemen, Sherman said formally, I present Letitia Whitmore, Chief Executive Officer of Whitmore Industries. The applause was sparse but genuine. I had work ahead, cleaning up Harold's messes, rebuilding trust, proving myself worthy of Eleanor's faith. But for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. The empire built on lies had fallen. It was time to build something better on truth. The knock came at 2:47 a.m., 3 sharp raps, then silence. I'd been awake anyway, reviewing financial reports that showed just how deep Harold's corruption ran. The company bled money through 1,000 small wounds, each one carefully designed to enrich my father at the expense of shareholders and employees. I checked the security monitor, shocked to see Patricia standing in the hallway. In 28 years, she'd never visited my apartment, never shown interest in how I lived, where I lived, whether I lived. Yet here she stood, designer coat, pulled tight against Seattle's perpetual drizzle. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Patricia. "May I come in?" Her voice lacked its usual acid. "Please, Letitia, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. Patricia entered like she was walking into a condemned building, her gaze cataloging my modest furniture, my cramped kitchen, the stack of work files covering my dining table. I saw her nose wrinkle at the small space, the ordinary life I'd built without their money. "Can I get you something, water, coffee?" "This isn't a social call." She perched on the edge of my couch like it might contaminate her. "I'm here to discuss the situation." "The situation where your husband is facing federal prosecution for multiple felonies." Patricia flinched but recovered quickly. "The situation where you're destroying your family over childish resentments." I almost laughed. "Childish resentments he threw me through a glass door." "You provoked him. You always provoked him even as a child, always watching with those serious eyes, judging us, making him feel like a failure in his own home." "He was a failure. He stole Eleanor's company and corrupted everything she built." "Eleanor." Patricia spat the name like poison. "Always Eleanor. Do you know what it was like living in that woman's shadow? Nothing I did was good enough. Not the way I raised Madison, not how I ran the household, certainly not how I supported Harold." For the first time, I heard something real in her voice, pain old and deep. "She died when I was 10, I said carefully. "Her ghost didn't." Patricia's mask slipped further. Every board meeting, every family gathering, every success Harold achieved, someone always had to mention how Eleanor would have done it differently, better. And then there was you. Me, her little protege. She saw it immediately, you know. The way you organized your toys, counted everything, asked questions about the business before you could properly pronounce the words. Patricia's laugh was bitter. She'd take you to the office, let you sit in board meetings. A 5-year-old child, and she treated you like her successor. I barely remember that. Harold remembered. Every day he remembered. His mother choosing his daughter over him. Patricia stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "Do you know why we had Madison? We'd decided one child was enough. But after Eleanor started grooming you, Harold needed a do-over. A child who would be purely ours, untainted by Eleanor's influence." The revelation hit like cold water. Madison wasn't the golden child by chance. She'd been created for that role. That's horrible. That's survival. Patricia turned back to me. Eleanor would have destroyed Harold eventually. Her constant criticism, her impossible standards. When she died, we thought we were finally free. Then we found that damned will. The one Harold had the executor killed over. Patricia went very still. You can't prove that. The FBI might disagree. She reached into her purse with shaking hands, pulling out a cashier's check. $1 million. Take it and disappear. Start fresh somewhere else. Europe, maybe. You always liked art. Go study in Paris. You're trying to buy me off. I'm trying to save what's left of my family. The tears came then, perfectly timed. Madison's pregnancy is high risk. The stress of Harold's arrest, the media attention. Her doctors worried about premature labor. Is your revenge worth your nephew's life? I studied her performance, because that's what it was, despite the real tears. Patricia had spent 40 years perfecting the art of manipulation, but there was genuine fear beneath the calculation. Madison's health isn't my responsibility. Harold created this situation. You exposed it. Patricia's control snapped. You could have stayed quiet, taken your little analyst job, and been grateful. Instead, you destroyed everything. I exposed the truth. There's a difference. Patricia threw the check at me. It fluttered to the floor between us. Truth. You want truth. Here's truth. You're not even ours. The words landed like a physical blow. I'd suspected, even hoped sometimes, but hearing it confirmed. I'm adopted. Harold's college girlfriend. She got pregnant, threatened to derail his engagement to me. Eleanor handled it, paid the girl off, arranged the adoption, insisted we raise you as our own. Patricia's smile turned cruel. So you see, you really are nothing to us. Not blood, not chosen. Just another one of Eleanor's obligations we had to fulfill. But instead of devastating me, the revelation brought strange peace. Eleanor knew, and she still chose me to inherit. Because she was a sentimental fool. Because she understood that family is about more than blood. I picked up the check, tore it in half. Thank you, Patricia. You've just confirmed what I always suspected. I was never your daughter, which makes what comes next easier. What comes next? Harold's trial, the full audit of Whitmore Industries, the revelation of every crime, every victim, every dollar stolen. I opened my apartment door. You should prepare Madison. Her trust fund was built on embezzled money. The FBI will freeze it all. Patricia's face went white. You vindictive little bitch. You'd hurt a pregnant woman to get at Harold. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm enforcing the law, something you and Harold never thought would apply to you. She stumbled toward the door designer heels catching on my ordinary carpet. He should have strangled you in the cradle, should have thrown you away like the trash you are. But he didn't, because Eleanor wouldn't let him. I met her eyes steadily. And now Eleanor's trash is taking out yours. Patricia fled, leaving behind only the torn check and the lingering scent of expensive perfume. I closed the door and leaned against it, processing the confirmation of what I'd always suspected. Not their biological child, not wanted or chosen. But Eleanor had chosen me, had seen potential where they saw obligation, had protected me even after death. I picked up the torn check, studying Patricia's desperate signature. $1 million to disappear. They still didn't understand that this wasn't about money. It had never been about money. It was about justice, about truth, about honoring the woman who'd loved me when my assigned parents couldn't. I returned to the financial reports energized rather than devastated. Patricia had meant to wound me with the adoption revelation. Instead, she'd freed me. I owed Harold and Patricia nothing. No filial loyalty, no genetic obligation to protect them. I was Eleanor Whitmore's chosen heir, and I had work to finish. The FBI raid came at dawn on a Thursday 3 weeks after the board meeting that removed Harold from power. I watched from my new office, Eleanor's old office recently restored, as black SUVs surrounded both the Whitmore Industries building and Harold's Bellevue mansion. Federal agents streamed out like ants armed with warrants and decades of pent-up frustration. Special Agent Diana Foster found me an hour later after her team had secured Harold's executive suite. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp brown eyes and an economy of movement that suggested military background. Ms. Whitmore, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk, thank you for your cooperation in this matter. I want the truth exposed, I replied, all of it. Diana smiled tightly. That's why we're here. Your brother-in-law, Brandon, has been very helpful. The offshore accounts he detailed match our forensic accounting perfectly. How bad is it? 23 years of systematic embezzlement. Your father stole approximately $47 million funneled through shell companies into offshore accounts. That's just what we can prove so far. $47 million. I thought about the employees Harold had laid off to cut costs, the bonuses he'd denied while claiming tight budgets, the retirement funds he'd underfunded while living in obscene luxury. What about the bribes? Senator Morrison is cooperating fully. Turns out your father wasn't the only businessman paying for favorable legislation. Morrison's looking at 20 years unless he helps us untangle the whole network. My phone buzzed. Madison again. I'd been fielding her increasingly frantic calls all morning but hadn't answered. Diana noticed. Your sister. Half-sister, though apparently not even that. Diana raised an eyebrow. I hadn't told anyone about Patricia's revelation yet. Harold's not my biological father. I'm adopted. Patricia told me 3 nights ago, thinking it would make me back off. Did it? It clarified things. I don't owe them mercy based on blood that doesn't exist. Diana pulled out a tablet, swiping through documents. Speaking of things that clarify, we've been investigating your grandmother's death. My heart stopped. Eleanor died of a heart attack. That's what the death certificate says, but we found interesting connections. The doctor who signed it. He received a substantial payment from your father 2 days later. Called it a consultation fee. You think Harold... I think a woman who was healthy enough to restructure her entire estate 2 months before her death might warrant a closer look. We're exhuming the body. The room spun slightly. I'd suspected Harold capable of murder after the executor's death, but Eleanor herself. When? This afternoon. We'll need a family member present to sign off. Since you're now the head of Whitmore Industries, I'll be there. Diana stood. There's something else. We've been monitoring your parents' communications. Your mother has been reaching out to some unsavory individuals, people who solve problems for a price. She's hiring someone to kill me. Nothing that concrete yet, but we're watching. I'd suggest varying your routines, maybe accepting that protection detail we offered. Before I could respond, my assistant's voice came over the intercom. Ms. Whitmore, your sister is here. She says it's urgent. Diana gathered her files. I'll leave you to it. But remember, desperate people do desperate things. She left as Madison stormed and her perfect composure shattered. Her designer maternity clothes couldn't hide the weight she'd lost the shadows under her eyes. Pregnancy wasn't agreeing with her, or maybe it was just the stress of watching her world collapse. You have to stop this, she said without preamble. Call off the FBI, drop the charges, something. Daddy's having a breakdown. They have him on suicide watch. Harold's mental state isn't my concern. He's your father. According to your mother, he's not. I'm adopted, remember? Just another obligation Eleanor forced on them. Madison sank into the chair Diana had vacated. Mom told you. Tuesday night. Thought it would hurt me enough to make me disappear. I studied my sister. Half-sister, not even that. Did you know? I found out when I was 16. Mom let it slip during one of her wine nights. Madison's hand went to her swollen belly. I used to be jealous, you know, thinking you had another family out there, people who might actually love you. Instead, I had yours who couldn't. Wouldn't, Madison corrected. It was a choice. Every birthday they ignored, every achievement they dismissed, every time they made you feel worthless. Those were choices. The honesty surprised me. Why are you here, Madison? Because I'm scared. The admission came out as a whisper. Brandon's filed for divorce. His family wants nothing to do with me. The FBI frozen all my accounts. I can't access my trust fund, can't pay for the private hospital, can't even afford groceries. Get a job. With what skills? I have a vanity degree in art history and a lifetime of spending daddy's money. She laughed bitterly. You were the smart one. Building your own life, your own company. I built nothing except a reputation as Harold Whitmore's spoiled daughter. You made your choices too, Madison. I know. Tears streamed down her face, and for once they seemed genuine. I know I was awful to you. Every cruel word, every public humiliation. I thought if I was perfect enough, mean enough to you, they'd love me more. Did it work? No, they're incapable of real love. I see that now. She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. The FBI wants me to testify about things I saw, things I knew. They're offering immunity. You should take it. It would destroy them completely. My testimony would corroborate everything Brandon's saying about the offshore accounts. I helped set some of them up. I leaned back, studying this stranger wearing my sister's face. "What do you want from me, Madison?" "A job. You offered one before. Start at the bottom, work my way up honestly. I need income for when the baby comes. Legal income that can't be frozen or seized." "You want to work for the sister you tormented for 28 years. I want to work for the CEO who's salvaging Grandma Eleanor's company." Madison straightened, finding some dignity in her desperation. "I may be spoiled, but I'm not stupid. I have an MBA from Wharton. Daddy's connections got me in, but I earned the degree myself. I can contribute." "And Harold Patricia are going to prison. With or without my testimony, they're finished. I can either go down with them or try to build something better for my child." I thought about Eleanor's letter, about merit versus blood, about the choices that defined us. Entry-level marketing coordinator, $35,000 a year, standard benefits. You report to Janet Chen, and if she says you're not pulling your weight, you're gone. Janet Chen, who Daddy tried to fire for being too aggressive. Janet Chen, who I just promoted to VP of marketing. Madison actually smiled. "She hates me." "Then you'd better work twice as hard to prove yourself." I slid an employment application across the desk. "Fill this out, submit to HR. You start Monday." Madison took the application with trembling hands. "Letitia, thank you, and I'm sorry for all of it. Prove it through actions, not words." She nodded and left, walking differently than when she'd entered. Not the entitled princess anymore, just a scared pregnant woman trying to salvage a future from the wreckage of her past. My phone rang. Diana Foster. "We found something at the mansion," she said. "Hidden safe in Harold's study. Documents, recordings, things we think you need to see immediately." "What kind of things?" "Evidence about Eleanor's death, and Letitia, bring a lawyer. What we found, it changes everything." I hung up, staring at Eleanor's portrait. We were about to uncover the truth about her death, and I suspected I already knew what we'd find. Harold hadn't just stolen her company, he'd stolen her life to get it. But Eleanor had planned for this too. Through the trust, through me, she'd ensured justice would come eventually. Time to see just how deep Harold's evil ran, and time to finish what Eleanor had started. 6 months after taking control of Whitmore Industries, I stood before 300 employees in the main conference hall, the same room where Harold had once announced layoffs while purchasing his third yacht. Today we were announcing something different. Effective immediately. I said, watching faces shift from wary to hopeful, Whitmore Industries is implementing a living wage policy. No employee will make less than $70,000 annually. This includes our janitorial staff, our food service workers, everyone who makes this company run. The room erupted. Not the polite golf claps of Harold's era, but genuine cheers, some people actually crying. Janet Chen, my new VP of marketing, gave me a subtle thumbs up from the front row. Marcus Vaughn had fled to Switzerland the day before the FBI raids, leaving our finances in shambles. But in those ruins, I'd found opportunity. Every inflated vendor contract, every shell company payment, every consulting fee that went nowhere, all of it stopped. The money saved went straight back to the people who actually created value. Furthermore, I continued once the noise died down. We're establishing an employee ownership program. Over the next 5 years, 15% of company shares will transfer to employee stock trusts. You won't just work for Whitmore Industries, you'll own it. Dorothy Pearson beamed from the board section. She'd been instrumental in designing the program, drawing on Eleanor's original vision for the company. After the meeting, I walked the floors, something Harold never did. In research and development, I found Thomas Kim, an engineer who'd been with the company 12 years. "Ms. Whitmore," he said nervously, "I wanted to thank you. The raise means my wife can quit her second job. She'll actually see our kids." "You shouldn't need to thank me for paying you fairly, Thomas. Show me what you're working on." He lit up explaining a new sustainable packaging design that could revolutionize our shipping costs while reducing environmental impact. Ideas Harold had dismissed as hippie nonsense when Thomas had proposed them 2 years ago. "Budget it," I said. "Full pilot program. If it works, we roll it out company-wide." The pattern repeated throughout the building. Employees who'd been silenced, overlooked, dismissed, suddenly free to contribute. Innovation flourished where fear had once ruled. In the executive dining room, now open to all employees, I found Madison eating alone. 4 months into her employment, very pregnant, working harder than I'd ever seen her work. "How's Janet treating you?" I asked, joining her. "Like any other entry-level coordinator, which is to say she works me into the ground." Madison rubbed her back. "I filed 17 reports yesterday. My hands are cramping from all the data entry." "Regretting your choice?" "Every day," she smiled wryly, "and also not at all. For the first time in my life, I'm earning something. When Janet complimented my campaign analysis last week, I nearly cried. She mentioned that, said you have potential if you can get past your entitlement." "I'm trying." Madison's expression sobered. "I testified yesterday, full immunity deal, told them everything about the offshore accounts. How do you feel?" "Like I cut off a gangrenous limb to save my life." She touched her belly. "This baby deserves better than the legacy Harold built. Maybe working here, seeing how things should be done." "Merit over blood," I said, echoing Eleanor's words. "Yeah, I'm starting to understand what that means." My phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Federal prison. "I need to take this," I told Madison. I stepped onto the executive balcony. The Seattle skyline spread before me. "Letitia." Harold's voice sounded broken, aged 20 years and 6 months. "You need to call off your dogs." "My dogs are federal prosecutors. I don't control them." "You started this. You can stop it." A pause, heavy breathing. "They're saying life in prison, life Letitia, for financial crimes. And murder." Silence, then, "You can't prove that." Eleanor's exhumation showed massive levels of digitalis in her system, the kind found in the heart medication you were supposedly helping her take, the same medication her real doctor says he never prescribed. She was old, confused. She took the wrong pills. "The prosecutor has your voice on tape, Harold, from that hidden safe in your study. You recorded yourself for some reason, maybe ego, maybe insurance. But you clearly state that Eleanor won't be a problem much longer, and that the digitalis is untraceable if administered correctly." More silence. I could hear him breathing, ragged and desperate. "She was going to ruin everything," he finally said. "Give the company to an outsider, some bleeding heart who'd destroy what I built." "What she built, and she was giving it to me." "You—" His laugh was bitter. "She barely knew you." "She knew me better than you ever did, saw potential where you saw obligation. You were nobody, some bastard child I had to raise because mother insisted. Do you know what it cost me? What I sacrificed? Your humanity, apparently. My future. Everything was supposed to be mine. The company, the legacy, all of it. Then you came along and suddenly mother had a new favorite. 10 years old and she was already grooming you to replace me. So you killed her." "I freed myself, and for 20 years it worked, until you decided to play detective. Until you threw me through a glass door and reminded me I had nothing left to lose." Harold's breathing grew labored. "The lawyer says I should take a plea, 25 to life, die in prison either way." "Then take it. Show one shred of the decency Eleanor hoped you had." "Eleanor," he spat the name. "Always Eleanor. Even dead, she wins." "She loved you, Harold. Despite everything, she loved her son. She just loved the company and its people more." "That's not love, that's betrayal." "No. Betrayal is poisoning your mother for money. Love is protecting the things that matter even from your own family." He hung up without another word. 3 days later, the news reported he'd accepted a plea deal. Life in prison, no possibility of parole. Patricia got 15 years as an accomplice after the fact. The empire they'd killed to build was officially dead. That evening, I called an impromptu celebration in the break room. Not for Harold's imprisonment, but for our first profitable quarter under new management. The company Eleanor built was thriving again, run on principles she'd recognize. "Speech," someone called out. Others took up the chant. I climbed onto a table, looking out at faces that had once feared coming to work. Eleanor Whitmore founded this company on a simple principle: merit over blood integrity over profit. We lost our way for a while, but we're back on track. And this is just the beginning. As cheers erupted, I spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Sherman Wallace raising a glass of champagne in silent salute. Beside him, Dorothy Pearson wiped away tears. "To Eleanor," I said, raising my own glass. "To Eleanor." 300 voices responded. But in my heart, I added a silent toast to the grandmother who saw me clearly, who loved me truly, who ensured that justice, though delayed, would not be denied. The company transformation was more than financial recovery. It was redemption proof that good could triumph over greed. Harold had stolen Eleanor's life, but not her legacy. That lived on in every fairly paid employee, every ethical decision, every moment we chose merit over blood. It lived on in me. Madison's water broke during a Tuesday morning marketing meeting. She'd been presenting quarterly projections when she suddenly gripped the conference table, her face going white. She gasped. "I need a hospital." Janet Chen took charge, immediately calling an ambulance while I gathered Madison's things. As EMTs loaded her onto a stretcher, Madison grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Come with me," she pleaded. "I can't do this alone." I thought of every cruel word she'd spoken, every public humiliation she'd orchestrated. Then I looked at her face, terrified young despite her 26 years utterly alone. "Janet, can you handle my 2 o'clock?" I asked. "Go," Janet said. "Family is family even when it's complicated." At Northwest Medical Center, Madison's labor progressed slowly. 12 hours of contractions, each one seeming to strip away another layer of the princess facade she'd worn her whole life. Between pains, she talked, really talked, for the first time in our lives. I found out about the trust when I was 22. She admitted gripping my hand through another contraction. "Harold had been drinking let it slip that you owned majority shares, that Grandma Eleanor had chosen you." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I was raised to be his perfect daughter. Speaking up would have meant choosing you over him." She laughed bitterly. "Look how well that loyalty served me." "You could have made different choices." Could I? From birth, I was molded into Harold's image. Every thought shaped, every decision guided. You got neglect. I got programming. A contraction hit, cutting off her words. When it passed, she continued. "Do you know what my first memory is? Harold teaching me to lie. I was 4, had broken Patricia's vase. He showed me how to blame the housekeeper, made it a game. This is how Whitmores handle problems," he said. "That's horrible." That was Tuesday. By the time I started school, I was a master manipulator. Top of my class, not through merit, but through knowing exactly which strings to pull. She shifted uncomfortably. "Brandon was the same. Harold introduced us, said we'd make a good merger." "You married for business." "I married because I didn't know love existed outside of transactions. Brandon offered status, wealth, genetic compatibility for producing heirs. What else was there?" Another contraction. They were coming faster now. "I need to tell you something," Madison panted when it passed, "about Eleanor's death." My blood chilled. "What about it?" "I was 13. The night before she died, I heard Harold and Patricia arguing. She was saying it was too dangerous that someone would figure it out. He said the digitalis was untraceable if done right." "You knew all these years you knew he murdered her." "I was 13 and terrified. Who would I tell the police Harold owned the board members in his pocket?" Tears streamed down her face. I convinced myself I'd misunderstood, that my father couldn't be a monster. But you knew he was. Yeah, deep down I knew, and I became one too, thinking it was the only way to survive. Dr. Sarah Patel entered, checking Madison's progress. Almost time. Is Dad coming? Dad's in federal prison, Madison said flatly, for murder among other things. Dr. Patel, professional to the core, didn't even blink. Then who's your support person? Madison looked at me. My sister, if she'll stay. 28 years of resentment warred with the simple human compassion of not letting someone face childbirth alone. Compassion won. I'll stay, I said. 2 hours later, Madison's son entered the world screaming. A healthy 7 pounds, 3 ounces of possibility. As Dr. Patel placed him on Madison's chest, I saw my sister truly vulnerable for the first time in her life. He's perfect, she whispered, unmarked by all of it. What will you name him? Madison studied her son's face, seeming to make a decision. Elliot, after Grandma Eleanor. Maybe her strength will skip the cursed generation and find him. Madison. I know I have no right to invoke her name, not after everything, but this baby deserves a heritage beyond Harold's crimes and my complicity. She looked up at me. Will you be his godmother, show him what real strength looks like? The request stunned me. Brandon's family want nothing to do with us. His parents made that clear. It's just me and Elliot now, and maybe if you're willing you. I thought about cycles, of abuse, of neglect, of children raised as weapons or afterthoughts. Eleanor had tried to break the cycle by choosing merit over blood, but maybe breaking cycles meant more than corporate succession. Maybe it meant extending grace where none had been given. Yes, I said, I'll be his godmother. Madison cried, then not the manipulative tears of our childhood, but real, exhausted, grateful sobs. I'll be better, she promised, for him. I'll learn what you learned, how to build instead of destroy, how to earn instead of take. Start by being honest with him, always, even when it's hard. Even about Harold, especially about Harold. He needs to know where he comes from, the good and bad. Eleanor's brilliance and Harold's evil. Then he can choose which legacy to embrace. A nurse brought paperwork. Under Father, Madison wrote unknown rather than Brandon's name. He doesn't deserve recognition, she explained. Abandoned us the moment things got difficult. What about financial support? I'd rather raise Elliot on my coordinator's salary than take money that comes with strings. She managed a tired smile. Besides, my boss says I might make senior coordinator by year end if I keep improving. Janet said that, apparently my campaign analysis shows promising strategic thinking once ego is removed from the equation. High praise from Janet Chen. We sat in comfortable silence watching Elliot sleep. The room that should have been filled with Harold's flowers and Patricia's posed photos instead held just us, the discarded daughters and the next generation. I'm going to tell him about you, Madison said suddenly. How you stood up to power, chose justice over comfort, saved Eleanor's company. How you gave me a chance when I deserved nothing. Tell him about Eleanor first. None of this would exist without her. I barely remember her, just fragments. Her office smelled like lavender. She kept butterscotch candies in her desk drawer. She let me sit on her lap during board meetings when I was very small. Madison's voice grew wistful. She saw me, I think, saw what Harold was making me into and tried to counter it with gentleness. She saw all of us. That was her gift. Madison shifted Elliot in her arms, wincing at the movement. Do you think she'd forgive me for becoming Harold's creature, for all the cruelty? I considered lying, offering easy absolution, but Madison had asked for honesty. I think she'd say forgiveness is earned through change. You're 26, Madison. You have decades to become someone she'd be proud of. Starting now, Madison agreed. Entry-level coordinator, single mother, reformed mean girl. It's not much of a foundation. It's better than a stolen empire built on lies. A knock interrupted us. Sherman Wallace entered carrying an enormous bouquet and a folder of documents. "Congratulations on young Elliot," he said warmly. Eleanor would be delighted to see her name carried forward. "Sherman, what are you doing here?" He set down the flowers, lavender roses, Eleanor's favorite, and opened the folder. Executing one of Eleanor's final provisions, she left instructions for any great-grandchildren born after her death, a trust fund modest but sufficient for education and basic needs. Madison's eyes widened, but Harold said she cut us all out. Harold said many things that weren't true. Eleanor believed in second chances, especially for the young. He handed Madison the papers. $50,000 for childhood expenses, then college tuition when the time comes. The only condition is that the child must be raised with integrity and compassion. "I don't deserve this," Madison whispered. "No," Sherman agreed gently, "but Elliot does." Eleanor understood that children shouldn't suffer for their parents' sins. As Madison signed the papers, I realized this was Eleanor's final chess move. Even in death, she'd provided for the innocent while ensuring accountability for the guilty. The money would give Elliot opportunities without the corruption of Harold's wealth. "There's one more thing," Sherman said, turning to me. The investigation into Eleanor's estate revealed additional assets she'd hidden from Harold. Foreign investments, art holdings, property. All legally yours through the trust. "How much?" "Approximately $30 million. Eleanor was better at Harold's games than he ever knew. She spent 20 years secretly building a parallel fortune he couldn't touch." I thought of Harold in his prison cell, knowing the mother he'd murdered had outsmarted him so thoroughly. It was almost enough to make me pity him. Almost. Use it to expand the employee ownership program, I decided. Eleanor would want the wealth she protected to benefit the people who actually build value. Sherman smiled. "I'll draw up the papers." After he left, Madison looked at me with something approaching awe. $30 million. You could retire tomorrow, live in luxury forever. Harold lived in luxury. Look where it led. I stood to leave, giving her time alone with Elliot. True wealth isn't what you take. It's what you build and who you lift up along the way. Letitia Madison called as I reached the door. "Thank you for staying for the job, for showing me there's another way to live. I'll make you proud. Make Eleanor proud." "Make yourself proud first. The rest follows." I left them there, Madonna and child beginning fresh in the ruins of an empire built on blood and lies. Elliot would grow up knowing his great-grandmother's name, but not her killer's legacy. He'd watch his mother earn her place through merit, not manipulation. The cycle Harold had perpetuated for decades was finally breaking. One honest day's work, one earned compliment, one genuine moment at a time. Eleanor would indeed be proud. The death threat started 3 weeks before Harold's murder trial. The first came via email, almost quaint in its directness. "Testify and die, bitch." I forwarded it to FBI agent Diana Foster, who added it to what she called my harassment file. "These are probably just Harold's old business associates trying to intimidate you," Diana said during our security briefing. "But we're taking them seriously." She assigned 2 federal marshals to shadow me, Maria Santos and James Wright, both ex-military, both thoroughly humorless. They turned my life into a series of secure routes and swept rooms checking my car for bombs each morning like it was perfectly normal. "Is this really necessary?" I asked Maria after she made me wait 20 minutes while she cleared a coffee shop. "Your father has connections to people who solve problems permanently," she replied. "So yes, it's necessary." The threats escalated. Photos of me at work at the grocery store visiting Madison and baby Elliot in their new apartment. Each image came with variations of the same message: don't testify, disappear, or we'll disappear you. Sherman Wallace moved into a hotel under federal protection after someone left a dead rat on his doorstep. Dorothy Pearson found her car tires slashed. Even Janet Chen received anonymous calls warning her to control your boss. Harold's desperate, Diana explained during trial prep. His plea deal fell apart when we added Eleanor's murder charges. He's looking at life without parole, and he knows your testimony seals it. We spent days in a windowless conference room preparing my testimony. Prosecutor Ann Hutchinson, a former Texas beauty queen turned legal pit bull, walked me through every detail. "Tell me about finding the financial records," she instructed. I recounted the discovery, the pattern recognition, the slow realization of Harold's crimes. "Good. Now tell me about the night he pushed you through the glass door." That was harder. The sense memory remained vivid. Glass exploding around me, blood running down my face, Harold's expression of pure rage. "Take your time," Anne said gently. "The jury needs to see him as he really is." "He looked satisfied," I finally said. Even with Patricia screaming, even with blood everywhere, he looked satisfied, like he'd finally done what he'd wanted to do for years. Anne nodded. "That's powerful. Now let's talk about Eleanor." This was the hardest part. Describing my grandmother's faith in me, her secret provisions, the truth about her death. Anne had the digitalis evidence, the recordings from Harold's safe, but she needed the human story too. She used to let me reorganize her office supplies. I said, surprising myself with the memory. I was maybe 6, would spend hours arranging her pens by color, her papers by size. Harold called it obsessive. Eleanor called it attention to detail. How did that make you feel? Seen, valued, like I mattered for who I was, not despite it. Anne smiled. Perfect. The jury needs to understand what Harold stole. Not just money or companies, but a grandmother who loved you. Between prep sessions, I ran Whitmore Industries. The company thrived under ethical leadership, our stock price climbing, as investors realized honest business was good business. I promoted Madison to senior coordinator after she landed 3 major accounts through sheer determination and 16-hour days. "You don't have to prove yourself this hard," I told her, finding her in the office at 10 p.m., Elliot sleeping in his carrier beside her desk. "Yes, I do," she replied, not looking up from her spreadsheets. "Every day I prove I'm not Harold's daughter. I'm Eleanor's great-granddaughter." The Friday before trial, Patricia made her move, not with hired thugs or anonymous threats, but with the weapon she wielded best, media manipulation. I woke to my phone exploding with calls. The morning news played Patricia's interview on repeat. She'd lost weight in federal custody, her designer clothes replaced with simple gray, her perfect hair now showing gray roots. The transformation was calculated for maximum sympathy. "My daughter Letitia has always been troubled," she told the interviewer with practiced tears. "We tried to help her, gave her every opportunity, but she resented Madison's success. This whole persecution is just jealousy taken to extremes." "What about the evidence of financial crimes?" Patricia dabbed her eyes delicately. "Harold made mistakes. Yes. But what businessman doesn't? Letitia has blown minor accounting errors into this conspiracy theory, and now she's claiming he murdered Eleanor, his own mother. It's fantasy." "She seems to have substantial proof." "Manipulated evidence. Letitia works in tech. She knows how to doctor recordings, forge documents. We're victims of an elaborate hoax by a disturbed young woman." The interviewer, clearly charmed, lobbed softball questions, while Patricia painted me as a delusional monster destroying an innocent family. By noon, justice for Harold was trending on social media. "Don't let it get to you," Diana advised. "This is desperation. The jury will see evidence, not PR campaigns." But the damage was real. Protesters appeared outside Whitmore Industries demanding, "I stop the witch hunt." Someone spray-painted "liar" across my reserved parking space. A few board members called nervous about the optics. "Stand firm," Dorothy Pearson counseled. Eleanor faced worse when she started the company. A woman in business in 1965, they called her everything Patricia's calling you. Sherman was more direct. "Patricia just violated her gag order with that interview. Anne's filing additional charges as we speak." That evening, I found an unexpected ally waiting in my office. Brandon Ashford, looking healthier than I'd seen him in years, freed from the weight of Harold's influence. "I saw Patricia's performance," he said without preamble. Made me sick. I wanted you to know I'm testifying too. Everything I know, every crime I helped facilitate. Your immunity deal is solid. Ironclad. Turns out the feds really like cooperating witnesses with receipts. He paused. I also wanted to apologize. Again. For all of it. You've apologized. Now you're making amends. That matters more. Madison let me see Elliot last week, he said softly. My son. Growing up without me because I chose Harold's money over everything else. I won't let that define me anymore. Good. He'll need a father who chose redemption over comfort. Brandon left and I returned to trial prep. Maria checked the windows while James swept for bugs. Our nightly routine now. Outside, Seattle glittered innocently unaware of the storm approaching. Monday morning would begin Harold's trial for murdering Eleanor Whitmore, for financial fraud spanning decades, for building an empire on blood and theft. Patricia could manipulate the media. Harold's associates could threaten violence. But truth, as Sherman said, properly deployed was the most powerful weapon. Eleanor had hidden that truth for 20 years, waiting for someone strong enough to wield it. I touched the small scar on my cheek, my permanent reminder of the night Harold showed his true face. He'd thrown me through glass, thinking he was destroying me. Instead, he'd transformed me into the weapon that would destroy him. The trial couldn't come soon enough. The King County Courthouse had never seen a media circus quite like Harold Whitmore's murder trial. News vans lined the street like a presidential motorcade. Photographers pressed against police barriers, shouting questions at anyone who looked remotely connected to the case. Maria and James flanked me as we pushed through the crowd, their bodies shields against the chaos. Letitia, did you fabricate evidence? Are you doing this for money? How does it feel to destroy your own father? I kept my eyes forward, Sherman's advice echoing, give them nothing, save it all for the jury. Inside courtroom 4A, the atmosphere was electric. The gallery packed with reporters, Whitmore Industries employees and curious citizens who'd won the lottery for seats. Harold sat at the defense table, looking diminished his expensive suit, unable to hide the weight loss, the gray pallor of months in custody. His legal team was impressive. Robert Killian, who defended senators and CEOs, flanked by 3 associates who probably cost more per hour than most people made in a month. But Ann Hutchinson stood alone at the prosecution table, radiating confidence like armor. All rise for the Honorable Judge Catherine Morrison, the bailiff announced. Judge Morrison, no relation to the senator as she'd made clear during selection, was known for running tight courtrooms and having zero tolerance for theatrics, exactly what this case needed. We begin with opening statements, she announced. Ms. Hutchinson. Anne rose, commanding the room instantly. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about power. The power a son stole from his mother, the power he wielded through fear and fraud, and ultimately the power of truth to expose even the darkest secrets. She outlined the case methodically. Financial crimes dating back 23 years, bribes to politicians' embezzlement that funded lavish lifestyles while employees were laid off. Then she dropped the bomb. But Harold Whitmore's greatest crime wasn't stealing money. It was stealing life itself. Eleanor Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Industries, brilliant businesswoman, loving grandmother, murdered by her own son because she dared to choose a different heir. Killian's opening was predictably polished. Harold was a successful businessman caught in a family dispute. Letitia, the bitter adopted daughter, had manufactured evidence to steal what she'd never earned. Eleanor's death was natural, the financial irregularities mere accounting disputes. This is a tragedy, Killian concluded, but not the one the prosecution claims. This is the tragedy of a daughter so consumed by jealousy she's willing to destroy her own family. The first week was financial testimony. Forensic accountants detailed Harold's embezzlement with mind-numbing precision. SEC investigators explained the bribery scheme. Each witness chipped away at Harold's legitimate businessman facade. Brandon's testimony was particularly damaging. He appeared in an ill-fitting suit, nervous but determined. "Mr. Ashford," Anne began, "tell us about the offshore accounts." Brandon detailed everything: account numbers, transfer procedures, Harold's instructions to hide money from government parasites. He produced emails, recordings, even handwritten notes from Harold explaining the scheme. "Did you believe this was legal?" Anne asked. "No, I knew it was wrong, but Harold made it seem like everyone did it, like I'd be stupid not to participate." Brandon's voice cracked. "I was stupid, just not the way he meant." Killian tried to destroy Brandon on cross-examination, painting him as a bitter ex-son-in-law seeking revenge. But Brandon held firm. "I'm not proud of what I did," he said, "but I'm done lying for Harold Whitmore." The second week brought character witnesses. Dorothy Pearson testified about Eleanor's legacy, Harold's systematic destruction of it. Employees described a culture of fear retaliation against whistleblowers, Harold's violent temper. Then came my turn. "State your name for the record," Anne instructed. "Letitia Whitmore." My voice carried clearly through the courtroom. "Are you Harold Whitmore's biological daughter?" "No, I'm adopted. Harold's college girlfriend gave birth to me. Eleanor Whitmore arranged the adoption." I felt rather than saw Harold tense at the defense table. This wasn't in any of the previous depositions. "When did you learn this?" "Patricia Whitmore told me 6 months ago, thinking it would hurt me enough to make me drop the investigation." I met the jury's eyes. It had the opposite effect. It freed me from any sense of obligation to protect them. Anne walked me through my history with the family, the neglect, the emotional abuse, the constant comparisons to Madison. Then we reached the night everything changed. "December 18th last year," Anne said. "Tell us about the family dinner." I described discovering the financial crimes confronting Harold, his escalating rage. "What happened when you mentioned the bribes to Senator Morrison?" "He lost control. Completely. He grabbed my shoulders, spun me around, and threw me backward with all his strength." "Threw you where?" "Through the glass doors of the dining room china cabinet." Anne introduced the medical records photos of my injuries that made several jurors flinch. "How did your family react?" Madison covered her mouth. Brandon stood frozen. Patricia screamed. I paused, remembering. Harold stepped over the broken glass and called me nothing, said I was a parasite living off their success. "What did you do?" I smiled. "You smiled, why?" "Because I realized I owned 51% of Whitmore Industries. Eleanor had protected me even from beyond the grave, and Harold had just given me everything I needed to claim it." Killian's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned my memory, my motives, my convenient discovery of evidence. But Anne had prepared me well. "Isn't it true you resented Madison your entire life?" "I resented the unfair treatment, not Madison herself." "You were jealous of her success." "What success? Madison never worked until I hired her 6 months ago. Her only achievement was being born to parents who valued her." "You admit you hated your family." "I admit I wanted them to love me. When that proved impossible, I settled for justice." The third week brought the murder evidence. The medical examiner explained digitalis poisoning, how it mimicked heart failure in elderly patients. The toxicology report showed levels that could only be deliberate. Then Anne played the recording from Harold's hidden safe. Harold's voice filled the courtroom, younger but unmistakably his. "Eleanor won't be a problem much longer. The digitalis is untraceable if administered correctly. By next week, everything will be mine as it should have been from the start." The jury recoiled. Several looked at Harold with open disgust. But the most devastating testimony came from someone unexpected: Patricia. She entered in prison gray, her perfect composure finally cracked beyond repair. The prosecution had offered her a deal, testify truthfully, and reduce her sentence by 5 years. "Mrs. Whitmore." Anne began gently, "Were you aware of your husband's plan to poison Eleanor?" Patricia's hands shook. "Yes." The gallery erupted. Judge Morrison gavelled for order. "Tell us what you knew." Harold had been researching digitalis for weeks, said Eleanor's heart medication provided perfect cover. I told him it was too dangerous that someone would figure it out. Patricia's voice dropped. He said no one would question a 71-year-old woman having a heart attack. What happened the night Eleanor died? Harold went to her house for their weekly dinner. He came home agitated, said she'd drunk the tea but was taking too long. Patricia closed her eyes. He went back. When he returned, he said it was done. "Did you report this to anyone?" "No. I was terrified. Of Harold, of losing everything, of being implicated." She finally looked at me. "I chose security over conscience. I've regretted it every day since." Harold's expression during Patricia's testimony was something I'll never forget. Rage, betrayal, and underneath it all, fear. The empire he'd built on lies was collapsing in real time. Killian tried damage control calling character witnesses who painted Harold as a devoted son, a business visionary. But after Patricia's testimony, it all rang hollow. Harold himself never testified. Killian probably knew putting him on the stand would be disaster. Harold's temper would destroy any sympathy they'd built. Closing arguments were predictable. Killian pushed the jealous daughter narrative, questioned the evidence's authenticity, begged for reasonable doubt. But Anne was masterful. Harold Whitmore had everything, she concluded. Wealth, power, success. But it wasn't enough because it wasn't really his. He was a parasite, his word, living off his mother's genius. And when she threatened to expose that truth by choosing a worthy heir, he killed her for it. Don't let him get away with murder because he wore an expensive suit while committing it. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they filed back in, none of them looked at Harold. On the charge of murder in the first degree, the foreman announced, "We find the defendant guilty." Guilty on all counts: murder, embezzlement, tax fraud, bribery, conspiracy. The list went on for minutes, each guilty another nail in Harold's coffin. Harold didn't react at first, sitting frozen as reality sank in. Then he turned, finding me in the gallery, and his mask finally shattered completely. "You destroyed everything," he screamed, lunging against his restraints. "Everything I built, you're nothing. You'll always be nothing." The bailiffs dragged him out, still screaming. His last words to me were the same as when he threw me through glass, "You're nothing." But he was wrong. I was Eleanor Whitmore's chosen heir. I was CEO of the company she'd built. I was the truth that finally caught up to his lies. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy reached new heights. But I pushed through with Maria and James heading home to run the company Eleanor had entrusted to me. Harold got life without parole, eligible for release when he turned 105. Patricia got 10 years with the plea deal. The empire they'd murdered to steal was gone, but something better had risen from its ashes. That night, I stood in Eleanor's restored office looking at her portrait. "We'd done it, grandmother. Justice delayed but not denied." The next morning, Whitmore Industries opened as usual, but for the first time in 23 years, it opened free of Harold's shadow. Eleanor's legacy was finally truly alive. The federal courthouse in downtown Seattle buzzed with anticipation as verdicts rolled in like dominoes. Harold's murder conviction had opened floodgates, and the justice system moved with unusual efficiency to clean up the mess he'd left behind. I sat in the gallery for Patricia's sentencing, Madison beside me with 6-month-old Elliot sleeping in her arms. Patricia looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, the designer wardrobe replaced by federal gray, the perfect hair now entirely silver. Patricia Whitmore, Judge Harrison intoned, "You have pled guilty to conspiracy to commit murder accessory after the fact and tax fraud. Do you have anything to say before sentencing?" Patricia stood slowly. "I spent 40 years living in fear. Fear of disappointing Harold, fear of losing status, fear of being nobody." Her voice was barely audible. "That fear made me complicit in murdering a good woman who showed me nothing but kindness. I deserve whatever sentence you impose." The court sentences you to 10 years federal incarceration with possibility of parole after 7. Patricia nodded, accepting her fate with more grace than she'd ever shown in freedom. As marshals led her away, she looked back at Madison and me. "Take care of each other," she said simply. Then she was gone. Madison wept quietly. Despite everything, Patricia was still her mother. I put an arm around her shoulders and she leaned into the comfort. "She made her choices," Madison whispered, "but I still wish she'd made different ones." "She has 7 years to become someone else," I offered. "People can change." "Do you believe that—" I thought about Madison herself working 60-hour weeks while raising Elliot alone, earning every promotion through merit rather than manipulation. I'm watching it happen. The following week brought Brandon's hearing. He'd cooperated, fully testified truthfully, and the prosecution honored their immunity deal. But the judge still had words for him. "Mr. Ashford, your cooperation prevented further crimes and helped secure justice. But you participated willingly in fraud that hurt thousands of employees and shareholders. Your immunity protects you from prosecution, not from consequences." Brandon stood straight, accepting the lecture. He'd moved back to Seattle, taken a job as a junior accountant at a nonprofit, and petitioned for partial custody of Elliot. The man who'd mocked me at Madison's wedding for lacking ambition now made $60,000 a year and seemed grateful for it. "I recommend community service," the judge continued. 1,000 hours teaching financial literacy in underserved communities, perhaps preventing others from making your mistakes. "I'll do it gladly, Your Honor." After court, Brandon approached us in the hallway. "Madison, could we talk about Elliot?" Madison looked at me, then nodded. "Letitia, would you mind—" I took Elliot watching his parents step aside for a difficult conversation about co-parenting and redemption. The baby stirred, opening Harold's green eyes in Eleanor's thoughtful expression. "Your family is complicated, little one," I told him, "but you'll have chances they never did." Sherman Wallace appeared at my elbow, smiling at the baby. Eleanor would have adored him. "Any word on the other cases?" Senator Morrison pled guilty to accepting bribes. 24 months minimum security. His aide got probation and community service. Sherman adjusted his glasses. "The offshore banks are cooperating fully. We've recovered nearly $30 million in stolen funds." "Return it to the employees," Harold cheated. "Retroactive bonuses, pension fund contributions, healthcare supplements." "Already drawing up the distribution plan." He paused. "There's something else. The federal prosecutor's office called. They're not pursuing charges against other board members who knew about Harold's crimes but stayed silent. Professional consequences only. Most are resigning in disgrace." "Good. They were cowards, not criminals. Let them live with that." Madison returned, eyes red but resolution firm. "Brandon gets supervised visits for now. If he stays clean, does his community service, we'll revisit in a year." "That's generous." "Elliot deserves a father if Brandon can become one worth having." She took her son back, kissing his forehead. "We all deserve second chances, just not infinite ones." Whitmore Industries, meanwhile, thrived under ethical leadership. The employee ownership program expanded. Stock prices reached record highs. We'd proved conclusively that honest business was good business. I implemented Eleanor's original vision: profit-sharing, community investment, environmental responsibility. The company that had been a monument to greed became a model for corporate citizenship. "You've exceeded even Eleanor's dreams," Dorothy Pearson told me at the quarterly board meeting. She'd be so proud. But the real validation came from unexpected sources. Employees stopped me in hallways to share how the wage increases had changed their lives. Customers wrote letters praising our ethical practices. Business schools sent requests for case studies on successful corporate transformation. One afternoon, I found Madison in Eleanor's old conference room, now converted to a lactation room for working mothers. She was feeding Elliot while reviewing marketing projections on her tablet. "Remember when you wouldn't even acknowledge me at family dinners?" she asked, without looking up. "Remember when you announced to my high school that I was too ugly for prom? God, I was horrible." She switched Elliot to the other side. Patricia called yesterday from prison. How was it? Sad. She's in therapy, finally dealing with decades of Harold's abuse. The therapist says she has complex PTSD. Madison sighed. I'm glad she's getting help, but it doesn't erase what she did. No, but understanding why might help you heal. Maybe. She burped Elliot with practiced efficiency. By the way, Janet's promoting me to marketing manager. Says my work on the Morrison Industries merger was exceptional. Because it was. You landed a $10 million account. Through actual skill, not manipulation or family connections. Do you know how good that feels? Yes, I said simply. I do. That evening I visited Harold in federal prison. I hadn't seen him since the trial, but something pulled me to face him one last time. He entered the visiting room in orange instead of Armani, looking every one of his 70 years. Come to gloat, his voice held none of its old power. Come to understand, why wasn't being Eleanor's son enough? Why did you need to own everything? Harold studied me through the reinforced glass. You really don't get it. Eleanor chose you the day you were born. Every moment after was just waiting for her to make it official. She loved you. She loved what I could have been. When I couldn't be, that she loved you instead. His shoulders slumped. Do you know what it's like competing with an adopted infant for your mother's approval? Losing to a child who organized blocks while I built actual buildings? So you killed her. I freed myself. For 23 years, I was finally enough. CEO, patriarch, emperor of my own making. He laughed bitterly. Then you had to play detective. You threw me through a glass door. My only regret is not throwing harder. I stood to leave. Goodbye, Harold. I hope you find peace. Wait, his voice cracked. Is it true Madison named the baby after Mother Elliot, Eleanor's strength in a new generation? Something shifted in Harold's expression. Regret maybe, or just the weight of all he'd lost. Tell him his grandfather is dead. Let him grow up clean. I left without responding. Harold would die in prison, but perhaps that moment of clarity was worth the visit. Outside, Seattle sparkled in rare sunshine. The city Eleanor had conquered with vision and integrity. The city Harold had corrupted with greed and murder. The city I was helping rebuild on foundations of truth. My phone buzzed. Madison with a photo of Elliot taking his first unsteady steps in the Whitmore Industries daycare. He's walking, get back here before you miss it. I smiled, heading back to the office. Eleanor built the family I'd found, the future we were creating. Justice had been served, not just in verdicts and sentences, but in transformation, redemption, and the triumph of merit over blood. Eleanor's legacy lived on stronger than ever, and Harold's shadow finally fully lifted. 1 year later, I stood in the renovated Whitmore Industries auditorium, addressing a crowd of employees, shareholders, and journalists. Behind me, a massive banner proclaimed Most Ethical Company 2025, alongside Eleanor's portrait restored to its rightful place of honor. When Eleanor Whitmore founded this company in 1965, she believed business could be both profitable and principled. For 23 years, we lost sight of that vision. Today, we reclaim it fully. The numbers spoke for themselves. Revenue up 30%. Employee satisfaction at 92%. We'd returned $40 million to cheated workers-funded scholarships for their children and established the Eleanor Whitmore Foundation for Workplace Justice. In the front row, Madison sat with Elliot on her lap, now Director of Strategic Partnerships, after 2 promotions earned through excellence. Beside her, Brandon held their son's diaper bag, co-parenting successfully after a year of proving himself worthy of second chances. But success isn't measured only in numbers, I continued. It's measured in the single mother who can now afford childcare because we pay living wages, the veteran who found purpose again in our skills training program, the whistleblower who speaks up knowing we'll protect, not punish them. Sherman Wallace watched from his honorary board seat, Dorothy Pearson beside him. They'd guided me through the transition, teaching me Eleanor's wisdom secondhand. Now they beamed like proud grandparents. Today we announce the next phase of employee ownership. By 2027, workers will control 30% of Whitmore Industries, because those who create value deserve to share in it. Thunderous applause filled the auditorium. I spotted Janet Chen wiping away tears, remembered her courage in promoting the woman who'd once tormented her. Forgiveness in action, creating possibility from pain. After the presentation, I found myself in Eleanor's office. My office now, though I'd always think of it as hers. The lavender scent she'd loved still lingered, refreshed daily by flowers I kept in her memory. A knock interrupted my thoughts. An elderly woman entered, supported by a walker but radiating quiet strength. "Ms. Whitmore, I'm Sarah Mitchell. I was Eleanor's secretary from 1965 to 1990. I rose immediately, helping her to a chair. "Mrs. Mitchell, what an honor. Eleanor spoke of you in her letters. She spoke of you constantly those last years. The granddaughter who organized her pens by color, who asked why companies existed." Sarah smiled. She'd say, "Sarah, that child sees patterns others miss. She'll run this place someday." I wish I'd known her better, understood her wisdom while she lived. You're living her wisdom now. Every ethical choice, every employee lifted up, every truth told despite consequences. Sarah reached into her bag, withdrawing a wrapped package. "She left this with me, said to give it to you when you'd proved worthy of her legacy. I'd say that time has come." Inside was a leather journal, Eleanor's handwriting filling pages with insights, observations, and dreams for the company. The final entry, dated a week before her death, made me gasp. "My darling Letitia, if you're reading this, then you've claimed your inheritance. Not just the shares, but the responsibility they represent. I know Harold will fight you. I know the path will be brutal. But I also know your strength, which is why I chose you. You wonder why I didn't simply give you the company directly. Because merit must be earned, not gifted. Because you needed to discover your own power. Because the struggle would forge you into the leader Whitmore Industries needs. By now, Harold has likely shown his true nature. Whatever he's done, forgive him if you can. He's my son, and I failed him by loving the idea of what he could be, rather than accepting who he was. Don't make my mistake. See, people clearly love them anyway when possible, but never at the cost of truth or justice. Build the company I envisioned, where talent matters more than connections, where integrity drives decisions, where profit serves purpose rather than replacing it. Trust your patterns, my dear organizer. They'll show you the way. All my love and faith." Sarah watched me read tissues ready. She loved you fiercely, spoke of you as the daughter of her heart regardless of blood. "Did you know Harold killed her?" I suspected. The sudden illness, his eager takeover. But I had no proof, and he made clear that questions would end badly. Sarah's face hardened. "My greatest regret is staying silent." "You're speaking now. That matters." We talked for hours, Sarah sharing stories of Eleanor's early struggles, her victories, her vision for ethical capitalism before the term existed. By the time she left, I felt Eleanor's presence more strongly than ever. That evening, the foundation hosted its first gala. We'd raised $12 million for programs supporting abuse survivors, funding legal aid and counseling. I'd insisted the venue be modest, Eleanor's style of elegance without excess. Madison found me on the balcony, escaping the crowd momentarily. Elliot toddled between us, walking confidently now, Eleanor's eyes bright with curiosity. "Janet offered me the VP position," Madison said quietly, "Vice President of Marketing for Whitmore Industries. You've earned it. Revenue from your campaigns alone justifies the promotion." I know. That's what makes it so strange. Earning things. Being valued for contributions rather than connections. She lifted Elliot, kissing his cheek. "I want him to know that feeling from birth, that achievement means something, that merit matters." "He will. We'll make sure of it." Brandon appeared in the doorway, still uncomfortable at company events, but trying. "Sorry to interrupt. Letitia, there's someone here to see you. Says she's from the Times, wants to discuss a profile piece." I returned inside to find Rachel Chen, the investigative journalist who'd broken Harold's story, now interested in its aftermath. "The rise and fall of Harold Whitmore was journalism gold," she said, "but the resurrection of Eleanor's vision. That's the story that matters. How a company built on lies became a beacon of corporate ethics. Tell Eleanor's story, not mine. She's the real hero here. Heroes need heirs. She chose wisely." As the gala continued, I moved through the crowd, no longer the invisible daughter, but visible leader. Employees approached freely, sharing ideas and concerns. Board members discussed expansion plans that prioritized workers alongside profits. The transformation was complete, yet ongoing, a living testament to Eleanor's beliefs. Near midnight, after the last guest departed, I stood again in Eleanor's office. Madison had taken Elliot home, Brandon driving them, a family healing through effort and honesty. Sherman and Dorothy had left arm in arm, their duty to Eleanor finally fulfilled through me. I opened Eleanor's journal again, reading her words about patterns and purpose. On my desk sat the latest financial reports showing record profits achieved ethically. The pattern was clear. Treating people well was good business. Revolutionary concept, apparently. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Elliot said his first real word tonight. Gamma for Grandma. He was looking at Eleanor's picture. The tears came then, 20 years of grief and gratitude mixing. Eleanor hadn't lived to see her legacy reclaimed, but perhaps she saw it anyway. In every employee who now owned shares in their future. In Madison learning to build rather than destroy. In Elliot carrying her name forward. In me, the granddaughter she chose over blood, honoring that choice daily. I thought about Harold in his cell, Patricia in her therapy, the empire of lies now rubble. Then I thought about what we'd built on that rubble. Something true, something worthy, something Eleanor would recognize as her own. "We did it, grandmother," I whispered to her portrait. "Your company, your values, your dream. All alive, all growing, all honoring the patterns you saw in a 5-year-old who organized pens." Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Expansion decisions, ethical dilemmas, the constant balance of profit and principle. But tonight in the office where Eleanor had built her vision and Harold had tried to bury it, I felt only gratitude. For the grandmother who saw me clearly, for the glass door that shattered my silence, for the truth that destroyed an empire of lies and birthed something better. The Whitmore legacy lived on, not Harold's corruption, but Eleanor's integrity. Merit over blood, truth over comfort, justice over complicity. And in a few hours, when Seattle's sun rose over the Sound, Whitmore Industries would open its doors to another day of proving that good business and good values weren't opposites but partners. Eleanor's greatest pattern finally complete. I stood there until dawn, watching the city wake, feeling the weight and wonder of inheritance fully claimed. Then I went home to rest, knowing that tomorrow I'd return to continue building on the foundation Eleanor laid one ethical decision at a time. The invisible daughter had become the visible leader, the stolen legacy had been reclaimed, and the company built on lies now stood firmly on truth. Eleanor Whitmore's granddaughter, chosen, challenged, and ultimately triumphant, was exactly where she belonged. I have a question for you, my friend. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? How did you find the courage to stand up for truth when everyone around you chose comfortable lies? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one and find strength in knowing we're not alone in these struggles. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own journey toward justice, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over adversity. Share this with someone who needs to remember that merit matters more than blood, that truth eventually conquers lies, and that sometimes the family we choose becomes stronger than the family we're given. Thank you for listening to my story. May you find the courage to claim your own inheritance, not just of money or position, but of values, integrity, and the strength to build something worthy from the rubble of what was lost. Until we meet again in the next story, remember, you are not nothing. You are exactly who you choose to become.